Hello and welcome to Self-Publishing with ALLi, the podcast that brings you all the advice, news, and inspiration an indie author needs today. Thanks to our sponsor, BookVault.app. They enable authors to sell high-quality print-on-demand books, including stunning special editions, directly to readers worldwide. And today, you're listening to our Creative Self-Publishing stream. It's brought to you by Orna Ross's Go Creative program, helping authors harness the power of creative flow in writing and publishing. And now, here's Orna Ross and Joanna Penn with today's episode.
Welcome to the Self-Publishing with ALLi podcast with me, Joanna Penn, and Orna Ross. Hi, Orna.
Hi, Joe. Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone. Now, this is the new format of our conversations where we talk about what we're up to, creative challenges and solutions, and hopefully giving you some tips for your writing and your author business. So we're going to start today. Orna, you were at London Book Fair last week, and I was kind of sorry to miss it. It was my 50th, so I was in Iceland, which we can come back to, but I've been coming with you for like a decade now, so I was sorry to miss it. So give us a bit of an update. How was London Book Fair?
Yeah, so we're still in that situation in the Olympia whereby they don't have the full amount of space that London Book Fair has traditionally had. There's building going on there, and it'll be the same again next year. So last year we found the space very cramped, and we decided, the Alliance of Independent Authors, who's been there every single year since we launched there in 2012, we decided not to take a stand this year, and I was pretty glad about that. There's new management in place at Reed, the company that organises London Book Fair, and authors were not central, let me put it that way. There was a list. The first thing you met when you went in was a list of the people who were at the fair, including, trade publishing, academic, children's, tech, everybody, and nothing about authors. And that kind of summed up. I mean, there was the usual space for authors to hang out, or the author lounge, and that was great because we were in a nice old wood-panelled building that felt very writerly. That was the highlight, but the space where the author lounge was really cramped up on the balcony, so it was very sort of lengthways, and when you were speaking on the stage you had to turn your back to one half of the audience, so it really was not ideal. And so any authors that I was speaking to generally felt that the education as well wasn't all that great for authors, the education at Author HQ. So I think next year we're going to, the decision has been made that next year we will do a London Book Fair Indie Author Fringe live event for indie authors. And we will link in with the fair in some way. And I'll be feeding all of this back to them because I am on the board and it is a new team in place and they obviously don't quite get how central authors are to the business. Another thing that they're doing is they were doing a lot of branding about creative this year rather than books, and I felt that might be an indication that revenue isn't coming from the traditional areas. It was very quiet. Now the official figures are the same. According to LBF, there were 30,000 visitors there, which is the same as last year. Last year felt quiet, down on previous years, and this year felt much quieter, particularly the Wednesday, which is usually very busy. So I'm wondering if they're kind of trying to stretch out into creative arenas, where I feel the growth for them lies in the area of author publishing and services for authors and, recognizing that authors are publishers now. But as I said, a conversation we will have.
Well, on that, because I obviously, in terms of the AI stuff and the tech stuff, for example, talking to 11 Labs, and we're going to come back to them, but they were at the fair. They had quite a big booth, I believe. And there's quite a lot of, when you say services, there's services for the publishing industry as well. And in fact, I just did my first contract. I haven't told you, I'm actually working on my first contract for AI narration of a French translation. So this is starting to happen. So what did you get the sense in terms of that side of things at the fair? Like last year, there were sessions on AI and audio and all of that kind of thing. Did you see that coming out, or was that not so visible?
it was visible, but you had to go looking for it if you were an author who arrived. So I found it because I was aware of that. And a lot of the talks on the tech stage and indeed on the main stage were better for authors than what was going on up in Author HQ. So yeah, there was a lively tech services area, and but there's no recognition that authors are going to be using that. It was very much removed from where we were, which I feel is a mistake. There's this whole sense of authors being in a corner, and before they used to be invited in and there were free tickets and things. Now that invitation is not forthcoming. It's a 30% discount on your ticket. And, there's just less and less understand. As authors become more and more important to the publishing industry, a London Book Fair is not reflecting that. It used to be the most author friendly of the fairs, of all of them. And I remember BEA going in exactly this direction, and we know where BEA ended up. And that's all.
Some people might not. What happened to BEA?
Well, we don't want that to happen to London Book Fair, do we? It's an important fair. Now, the rights area was very lively, and it was interesting to see that authors were taking tables in the Rights Centre. And I did an interactive panel with some agents, and there was some interesting findings. We talk about that a little further on today. But yeah, all in all, I think we just need it to recognise what's actually happening in author publishing.
Well, yeah, on that, agents and traditional publishing. So people might remember from our last chat, which was 3 months ago, I have a book out, Blood Vintage, with an agent and in submission to traditional publishing. And we still hate the word submission, obviously. But 6 months now, it was September when those original things went out. We've sent out some more. We have had some rejections, but basically it's been pretty quiet. So I originally set a deadline for December, and then I've said, okay, now my deadline is 1 year. So September, if I haven't had any kind of decent deal, it's coming back to me. But it's so funny because everyone tells you how long these things take, and you're like, no, surely it can't be that ridiculous. How can anyone run a business like this? And then it is.
Yes, no, it takes a very traditional publishing. The wheels move exceedingly slow. Yeah, and I did think it's interesting that so many authors were taking it into their own hands now, because that's something we've been talking about at ALLi for a very long time. Licensing rights is essentially an administration job. You find out where the sub-agents are around the world if you're interested in translation, and you go directly to them because they know the marketplace, or you can go directly to a small publisher or even indeed a larger publisher who appeals to you in a particular arena. So that is always a possibility. However, it's not a fun job, to put it mildly. So having an agent to do this and being invested in actually making the sale is a good thing. One thing that we saw a lot of when I was chatting to agents at the fair was print only is definitely on the rise, and that is obviously a really good deal for indies. That is the best possible deal you can get, is a print only deal for say 5 years or something, and see how they get on in the stores. But on the other side of the equation, just speaking to publishers about books in stores, it's becoming almost impossible to sell fiction into what they call retail. And deals with traditional publishers are based on retail. That's essentially still how they measure their sales, even though they do now, do ebooks and they don't tend to do audio themselves. They tend to sub license audio, but they do produce their own ebooks. But even though they do, all their calculations on a book is based on retail, and the books that are selling in shops in the shops are nonfiction, celebrity, cookery, that kind children's, exactly, all those what you might call colourful, expensive, beautiful books still sell, but your average novel is down again. Year on year, we hear this story. So that, fiction is selling largely in ebook, and it has to be a very exceptional author or an author who's been around for a very long time. So that's why you're still seeing, you see fewer debut authors in fiction in the stores than ever before, and it's full of people who are, who have been in publishing for a very long time. They're just working. They're still paying because their readers are used to going in and buying their books in stores. But that generation of readers is going to be gone, in the not too distant future.
Oh
And
no, everyone lives forever. But no, it's interesting you say that because our local Waterstones here in Bath, and Bath has a lot of bookshops, and this Waterstones is big. They used to have the ground floor that when you walked in, it was fiction, and now they've changed the store. You walk in, it's non-fiction, travel, cookery, children's on that ground floor, and then they pushed the fiction into the basement.
that's exactly what's happening. That's exactly so good for them in the sense that they know what they're doing. But that it's the same in the chain stores in the US, and I think it was happening there in Barnes and Noble first of all. So yeah, it's a worldwide trend. Fiction is just
Mm,
not selling in print in stores, and yet we still see members coming into ALLi who, in their heads, that's what they're looking for. They want their books in bookstores, but actually how the other talk that the Alliance organised at London Book Fair was with Sasha and Adam,
mm,
called New Sasha Black and Adam Beswick, and it was called New Models in Self-Publishing, and it was very much about showing those authors who were at the fair a different way of doing things because they're doing something that's not every author is going to want to do by any
mm,
means. Most authors are not going to want to do it, but they are showing what is possible in the sense that they are handling their own warehousing and distribution now for their print books and other merchandise, and that's really interesting. And we're seeing it also with the lit RPG authors, which I think is possibly the next romantasy. It's definitely on the rise. And so, yeah, what was interesting there was just, first of all, what authors can do anything now that traditional publishing could only do before. But secondly, the way in which an author's book gets into a bookstore now is to succeed outside of the bookstore. So sell on your own website, sell well in the retailers, and then you will find that readers go into the bookstore and ask about your book,
mm.
and then they begin to stock it. And it's a kind of organic thing that happens through Ingram Spark still mainly, or through Book Vault in some areas. So yeah, I think that's interesting. Rather than we have a guide how to get your book into bookstores, and you could nearly scrap that guide and just say sell well everywhere else.
And then someone will ask you. That's the other thing about, getting translation deals. Often they come to you if things are working. So as ever, sorry everyone, it is about still marketing your book, getting noticed, selling some stuff. But let's just go halfway between, because there might be some people feeling like, well, I don't want to do what Sasha as Ruby Rowe and Adam Beswick do, and I certainly don't want a warehouse. You don't want a warehouse. 99.9% of authors do not want to do that model. But I'm about to launch, and obviously we've both done Kickstarters. I'm about to launch my next one, which is Death Valley, which is a thriller. It is the first book I think fiction I've written with no supernatural element, which is kind of crazy. But I've written it for a number of reasons, one of which is film, and I'll come back to that. But I wanted to talk about this because so people know, I'm not warehousing, so I get the orders from Kickstarter, Book Vault print them, Book Vault send them out to customers. So you can do a print heavy focus, but without handling all the stock yourself, which I think is really important. And I'm doing the sprayed edges and the foil and all those lovely things that most traditionally published authors don't get anyway. But I wanted to mention it also because my process has changed. And and I've, been writing fiction now. I started fiction in sort of 2009-ish. So this is the first time my process has really changed. So before Christmas, I went to Death Valley in California, and then I worked with Chat and Claude.ai, who is, it's like got a real personality. And I did an outline, and I'm a discovery writer, so doing an outline was a really new process. And then I worked with my editor, Kristen, human editor, and we finessed the outline. And then I wrote the thriller in sort of January, February, and there's this thing going around the AI tech community called vibe coding. And vibe coding is a sort of, well, one, you don't need to be a programmer. You tell the AI is what you want and it will code it, and then you say, no, no, do a bit more of this, and it will recode it. But it's more of a sense of flow. There's a lot of discussion of flow, creative flow when vibe coding. And I was like, okay, wow, this is exactly it. This is how it feels. So how I would have my writing session and I would open chat, I would open Claude, I open Scrivener, I open my outline. And then essentially I would feel like I would go into a sort of flow process between one to the other, writing some stuff, putting that writing in, saying what could happen next, what might this character do, putting that back in, editing that, and just going backwards and forwards. And I have to say, it was like a joyful, creative process. And I just love this term vibe coding. I wonder what you felt about it, because I just feel my brain is on fire when I work this way. And it's a very different process on fire in a good way, by the way, a very different process from me sitting alone. And I am still alone, but I don't feel alone. And I used to just, sit and type. And this process is so joyful. I wondered what you felt about that.
I haven't done or wasn't even aware of the term vibe coding, and I think I'd call it something else if I was in charge.
But that's the programmers,
Yeah, the things they come up with, honestly. But from a user perspective, it sounds awesome. My sort of go-to before, when I used to run into a writing, when you're just kind of stopped and you can't go any further, it used to be to get up and make a cup of tea or coffee. Now my process is to throw it into some AI and see what it throws back. So it sounds like I'm very early in the evolutionary scale of vibe coding, but what I'm trying to get at is that response, that sense of being supported is something that I value very much. Even when I don't use what comes back, and I often don't, it sparks something, and there's that sense of support. I feel like I have this, the most loyal and intelligent assistant that it's possible to have. And I only use chat, really. I haven't gone there, even with Claude. I know you've been saying to me, Claude, 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 Claude for a long time. And I will. I'm not in a major writing phase at the moment, just for personal reasons, but it sounds awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really fun. And then, of course, from my editing process is the same. I print out the book and hand edit, put my edits back in. So just to be clear, every single line in this book is touched by me from, my original ideas. Like, I totally feel like it's my book. There is no sense in that it's not. And then I hand edit it. So, and I share the pages of my edits. There's a lot of hand edits. And then I work with Kristen, my editor, on the line edits. And then I've also worked with a Death Valley specialist, which has been awesome. It's so lovely when you get a beta reader who's not a writer. And his comments were just lovely because they were from a reader's perspective. And so that was a wonderful process, really. The first time I've worked with a beta reader who's just a reader.
Right.
And then, yes, so if people are interested, jfpenn.com/Death Valley, that will go to Kickstarter, or in the future it will redirect. The other thing I should say, I also did the book trailer, which is on YouTube, and I did that with Midjourney. You know how much I love Midjourney. I've been using Midjourney for maybe 2 years now. And then I animate that with Runway ML. And that is just getting more and more fun as well. And then I also work with Canva to put it together. So again, my book trailer process is different. Probably took me about 4 hours to do the book trailer, and people are saying they really love it.
It's really good. It's really, really good. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. And as you've seen it, it's mainly characters. And this is really the first time. And I think this is another way that working with the AIs is so good, because a dialogue is a real weakness of mine. because I spend so much time quiet and I don't particularly like talking with people. But you once you get into a character and then you can basically say rewrite, my dialogue is real clunky and then I say rewrite this in Jack's voice and this is Jack and it will just do such a better job. Jack is a prepper in the book and it's just so much better. So that's a really interesting way. So let's say my process of collaboration with AI tools is just, getting more and more interesting, let's say. So, but you've been doing something around illustration, haven't you, as well?
I have, though not as hands on as you. And I just want to, before we leave what you're saying there, because you are our indie AI pioneer out there trying out everything and bringing it back to the community in a really generous way. And it's so interesting to watch your process evolve. And I think to go back to LBF, there was a very polarized discussion going on around AI and authors. And yes, of course, we need to work on the licensing thing, and absolutely there are copyright issues and all of that. And we at the Alliance take all of that very, very seriously. But there was no discussion whatsoever about ways in which authors are using AI in that creative way. And I think, it's so important that that understanding does get through to the author community, because there were people grandstanding and sort of, doing this performative thing. Oh, we hate AI, and then authors giving them rounds of applause, and that gets nobody, gets us all precisely nowhere. So yeah,
Well, stop using Amazon then.
yeah, stop using
and Google and all of them.
every tool, and yeah, and not to mention your personal life where it's also involved. Yeah, all of that. But yeah, it's just such an important message as to how to, and it strikes me as you were talking, we always talk about be more you when we're talking about, the doubling down on being human, that sort of cliche almost now. And it's clear that your process with AI is becoming more you. And so
Yep.
that you-ness is becoming embedded in the using of the tools as well as in the things that are not the tools. So I think that's interesting.
Oh, good. Right. And illustration.
Illustration, and my beautiful daughter, you mentioned runway there. I've been listening to words like, runway, and all these, like you, she has all these softwares in her back pocket, and she's an artist. And when I started producing a series of gift poetry books about 2 years ago now, probably. I'm doing the final one. Well, it was supposed to be for Easter this year, probably won't be, but later on in the year, this year, I started to use AI illustration and had great fun with it. And, put out two of the books, or three of them, I think. The first one I worked with human photographers. And then after that, I did some AI illustration myself. Well, I took a look at them recently and I thought, you were very excited, bless you, about what AI
Things
could
have
do.
moved on.
But things have moved on, absolutely. And then I thought, well, my daughter. So we've been working together on AI illustrations. Now the skills you're bringing as a writer to the stuff she's bringing as an artist, and so we're getting these beautiful pictures. And the other thing that was happening was my illustrations were all over the place. If I'd liked it, I settled on it and put it in, but there was no sense of continuity across the book, never mind across the series. So we're going back in, and she's done up a sort of an aesthetic style for the books, and we're working on it, and it's such fun. It's so nice. So it's like there are three of us, if you call it AI, or about 25 of us if you call it all the different little softwares that she draws on when she's doing her work. And it's just such a lovely thing. And it's really interesting to see her and to talk to her about her process with the AI tools as well, and how she gets the best out. So I see an image and then I see each stage of the image evolving, and it's just so like how the writing process evolves. It's really, and it has fed back into how I use AI in writing. So yeah, interesting.
Well, I think this is the point. If you already have skill in an area, if you're deeply knowledgeable, you're going to be better. It's like if you asked me to work with the AI music stuff, I'd be like, no, because I literally know nothing and I can't even prompt about music. But visual art, I'm very visual. I take a lot of photos and I did, more like art history and stuff. So I have some visual sense. But with what you've said there and just so people know, your daughter's name is Orna.
Not confusing at all.
Your daughter Orna's skill, I mean, that's incredible. On that, is she available for other people to hire?
Yes, a select group. She does some client work. She's a working artist, so she needs to keep her time clear. But yeah.
But yeah, I think there is more and more work available for AI positive people who will do that kind of collaborative process, for people who don't have any visual skill and can't prompt these things visually. And this is why I'm also not scared of AI taking our jobs or whatever. It may, whatever, it can do its own thing over there. But for us who have the skills to write, for us who have the imagination and the vision and the direction, this makes me feel a lot more like how a lot of musicians create. Musicians who, obviously might play one instrument or a couple, but they don't create the entire song themselves sitting in a room, and the movie director doesn't act every scene and do all the music, and the director directs everything, and they're the ones who win the awards, and the musicians who use beats that they've synced in and whatever. So I feel like that's where and the photographers, my brother's a photographer, he doesn't create every pixel manually. So I think this is what we're moving into, and yeah, the fun and the creativity and the spark, this is what makes it worth it. And again, it's like those early days of indie when people spent 5 years arguing over the validation of ebooks and self-publishing, and meanwhile we were all just getting on with it. And that's how I feel, is let's just get on with it. So should we move into AI audio, or any other comments on that?
No, I think that's enough on that. Yeah, tell me about 11 Labs, because the whole community is talking about 11 Labs.
Yeah, so there's been two major developments in the last few weeks even. So 11 Labs, if people don't know, it is the top, I think, the best AI audio service out there. 11labs.io, you can go listen to it. It's emotional. They have so many voices. They also pay humans to license their voices. And so I'm looking at that at the moment. So they have paid out 2 narrators. That's a really important point. They've been around for a while now. Authors have been creating books with them. But what happened was Spotify announced their integration. So findawayvoices.com, which is now owned by Spotify, but still distributes to a lot of different services. You can now, out of 11 Labs, click a button, output a file which you can upload to Findaway Voices. So it was previously you could only sell your AI narrated files on Kobo, on YouTube, on your own website. You can now sell them on Spotify or put them into the subscription program, and then obviously they're expanding that to other services. There's already more, I just don't know them off the top of my head. So that was one thing. I did a short story, A Midwinter Sacrifice. I used a male voice because the character's male. I also did multi-voice. So the character in it is Irish, and I used an Irish male voice, and then I had female voices. I had, so I used about 7 voices, and then I used my own voice clone for the author's note. So that's free. People can have a listen to that, A Midwinter Sacrifice by J.F.Penn. And there's also a version of me, human me, narrating it. So we can do all these things. This is so cool. Then what happened? So I was like, this is great. I was still going to do the human version, human narrated me narration for Death Valley. But then last week I got the invite to Amazon's Audible Virtual Voice, AVV. This has been live for about a year, but invite only, US only, mostly romance authors. And there's probably more than 50,000 AI narrated books out there. But they are now rolling it out. Now, I think they're rolling this out aggressively because of what happened with Spotify, because it was like, okay, this is the tipping point. Now, I jumped straight on. Now, most of my books are already in audio. So obviously this is only available if there's no Audible version. But one of my books, Catacomb, I've been kind of waiting on that. So I went in, it's free, and 11 Labs, you still have to pay. It's probably only $100, $200 with 11 Labs, but on AVV, it's free. It's not available to everyone right now. So depending on when you're listening to this, it may or may not be available on your dashboard. But I've heard from other people in the UK, people in Canada, that it is rolling out. So I would just expect it to keep rolling out. They don't have as many voices, but it's still pretty good. It's very, very easy. So people who are audio purists won't want to use it because it's not directable enough. But in terms of getting audio out fast, it's pretty significant, and also it's free.
And it
And
will improve,
yes,
this is the thing.
of
Yeah,
course.
yeah.
And right now it's in English and Spanish, but again, they'll probably expand it out. And again, 11 Labs has more accents, more languages. But so I guess the point of bringing this up, and what happened is I've changed my mind on Death Valley. So I'm now going to use 11 Labs for Death Valley. But just to be clear, you cannot use 11 Labs files on Audible or KDP. You cannot use AVV files anywhere else. So essentially, this means if you want to sell audio wide, you will have to do two versions. But I think that probably people might do that because it's so much easier. Now, just again, to be clear on our stance, we are very pro human narrator. I am a human narrator. I have narrated most of my nonfiction audiobooks. I will still do that. But this is mainly for those books that would never have got an audiobook in the first place. Most authors don't, most books are not in audio. And in terms of accessibility, in terms of the market, there are pros and cons. As ever, this is going to make a lot more audio available. So I think people are going to have to think very much, the human narrators are going to have to differentiate. Like, why should people hire you? What is the benefit? And you need to be able to say that. And then a lot of people are going to just go with probably the free version on Amazon. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? And what are your takeaways for authors listening?
Yeah, well, first of all, we welcome always technology that makes it easier for authors to make a living from their writing, because that's what we support as an alliance. So again, all the sort of caveats that we have around AI in terms of copyright licensing, etc., are on selfpublishingadvice.org/A, where we have a page there that we continue to update as things change in the community. So yes, just like human artists, human narrators, and human writers, AI is coming into our world and making things happen now. Our overall position is to sort of take a median position, which tries to weigh up all the different, like a doctor weighing up risks and benefits of a medication. We're weighing up the pros and cons all the time. So in terms of having conversations, our conversation that we had a moment ago about the illustration and the writing, is there, and you may or may not know this at this point, is there a way in which human narrators can work? It seems to me that narration is a little bit different. Is there a way human narrators can work with AI narrated work and improve it, get that, what did you call it, vibe going on?
Yeah, you're exactly right. The problem is most narrators are taking a very hard stance on this. So there is a huge gap in the market because most people do not want to sit there with 11 Labs or with AVV and create their own AI audiobook, because you still have to listen to every line, and most people are not good at that. Orna put her hand up. And so, for example, you want to change, and what they have introduced in 11 Labs and probably will in AVV is speech to speech. So if a line of dialogue is not said in the right way, you can say it yourself and then turn it into the voice. So I could say, Orna, where are you going today, in my voice, and then turn that into, like, let's say, a US male voice using the same intonation. So yes, people who are specialists in audio should be offering services, or could offer services, helping people create AI narrated audiobooks for a lot cheaper, but still get paid. But what I've seen is that a lot of the narrators are saying, no, not doing that, not working with those tools. And So I think at the moment there's a gap in the market, but I'm working with someone on my book, and I think that this is going to fill quite quickly with services. So yes, if you are a narrator, I do think offering a cheaper service that's not your normal human narration rate. It has to be cheaper. It can still obviously be more expensive than the credits used to create it. But yeah, completely agree.
Yeah, I think that is the way forward because for me, I've used a human narrator for just a few of my books. I've always resisted doing my own narration, even though, people have said, and I may actually do my poetry. I may come around to doing that in time. I definitely would never narrate a long
Fiction.
book. I
Mm.
just don't have the skills to do fiction at all, and I don't have the patience to do nonfiction, a large text. So I think, but at the same time, when it comes to AI, just kind of uploading it and pressing a button, I wouldn't really, again, know how to even make sure that I was happy. I'd listen to the whole thing through, but if I wanted to improve it, I wouldn't know how. So if there was somebody there who would hold my little hand through that process, I definitely would be prepared to pay. And I think this is the way the market's going to go. We're going to have the human rated kind of like our premium,
Premium, yeah.
yeah, edition, like our gold edged hardback in print. And then we're going to have the straight on and then maybe, a middle way, which uses both and may possibly, I don't know, certainly with writing and illustration, I'm seeing maybe better than either human
Yeah.
narrated alone or the thing is that audiobooks are the area of the publishing world that is still in growth in a big way
Mm.
because traditionally so few books have actually got an audiobook license that it's tiny. The percentages are really low. So it's like ebooks were 10 years ago. There's a gap there that's being filled now, and it's a good time for authors to think about getting into audio if you haven't already, or taking it much more seriously. So that's
Mm.
certainly on my to-do list because audio has always been a kind of a poor third for me, whereas you've been very audio led, I know.
Yeah, because I've been in podcasting so long. But also on this, the right stuff is really interesting. So you'll remember my book from 2020, my AI book. And in the chapter on voice, I said we need right stratification for audio. And this is the big problem right now. If you sign an audiobook deal, you sign audio. And audio now is not one thing. And so with this contract I'm currently in negotiation, I've said, okay, you want to do AI narrated audio. The contract has to say AI narrated audio book. I retain human narration of that. So what we mustn't do is just sign an audiobook deal. It needs to specify, is this human? Is this AI? Because a lot of publishers are just going to jump into this. But what's lovely about Findaway Voices is that you can do audio without attaching it to a book. So like I said, A Midwinter Sacrifice is available in two formats, essentially a human narrated author version and an AI narrated version. And this is how I see it. So, and then in the future, what if for Death Valley, there's going to be an AI narrated version. What if I want to do a multicast production when my screenplay gets made into a movie? I can license that separately. So this is what we now have to think because our book contracts might have ebook, might have paperback, might have hardback, might have large print. But with audio, it's just audiobooks. So how do you see that development in terms of licensing?
Yeah, there's going to be, I mean, in terms of the rights buyer, it's in their interest to keep it simple.
Exactly.
And in terms of the rights licensor, then it's important. So this is another education job
Mm.
where authors need to become educated about what's going on. And if when they get a contract or an offer from somebody, that they don't just go, woohoo, yay, where's the line? Let me sign.
Mm.
Understanding how key, owning the rights is and limiting. So we have three kind of principles when you're licensing rights. One is time, to keep the time as short as possible, 5 years or less, and not life of copyright, and territory where exactly the book will be distributed. And then the other is to get granular about the rights themselves.
And just on that, on the contract, the first one they sent to me, they had literally just left the percentage, the royalty percentage. And I went back to them and said, it's fair enough to have a lower royalty percentage if you have a human narrator, but this is AI. So I should get a higher royalty percentage for an AI narrated audiobook. Come on. So this is why this is in negotiation. But I have a feeling this is the type of thing not many people are negotiating right now. So it feels like because people aren't open enough to it to even say yes, but then they're also not fighting back. So I feel like there's some very interesting audiobook royalty and licensing deals to be done. And this will really open things up. I think some publishers, some audio publishers who kind of go, maybe we could get rights to more books that way. So there might be some deals available to more authors now.
There are deals coming out to authors. There were a number of authors talking at the fair about significant audio deals that they were negotiating with Audible and others in a different way. And what's happening too is that authors are saying, "Oh, you need to know about my friend," and talking to them. And this is another way in which, those authors who are saying no AI, pulling down the blind, are effectively not necessarily. I mean, if that is your position, of course, and you're happy with that position and that's the position you want to take, nobody around here is going to tell you shouldn't feel that way. But if you're doing that because you don't understand, then that's a different thing. So before you decide, you need to understand, because you cannot do any of this stuff that is good for your author business. And by extension, what's good for your author business is good for other authors too. You can't do these things if you're not open to understanding them in the first place, if it's a big no and you're not even listening. So definitely anyone who's wavering, I should say, should engage with this question, because it's really important. And once you're doing well, these things become very live. Decisions have to be made very quickly. So the more you can educate yourself in advance, the better.
Right. Well, this has been a great discussion today. I think we're going to wind it up because we've been going a while. But next time, I think it'd be nice to focus on some of the more interesting human-led marketing. I am bringing back my books and travel podcast, which will be interesting because I let it go a few years ago. So maybe we can also talk about endings and beginnings and all of that kind of thing. Anything else you want to bring up before we close?
No, I think we've given a good airing to what's going on for us in this time. We'd love to hear from you guys about what's going on for you and how your things are changing. Everybody's author business now seems to be diverging, and we all did things the same before, but we're all doing things quite differently now. So it's really great for us to hear from you, especially if you're doing something that's really exciting you. And that doesn't have to be huge. It can be something that's just moving things along for you. It's really interesting. So do share if you're an ALLi member, do share what's going on for you in the forum, as well as asking your questions and getting advice. And until next time, happy writing and
happy publishing.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to Self-Publishing with ALLi, the podcast that brings you all the advice, news, and inspiration an indie author needs today. Thanks to our podcast sponsor, BookVault.app. They enable authors to sell high-quality print-on-demand books, including stunning special editions, directly to readers worldwide. Our creative self-publishing stream is brought to you by Orner Ross's Go Creative program, helping authors harness the power of creative flow in writing and publishing. And if you haven't already, we invite you to join our association and become a self-publishing ally. You could do that at allianceindependentauthors.org.